Hey, Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day, all Bills all the time. And now Matt Bovee and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
Game days coming up. The Bills actually have a really important 15-day stretch starting Sunday at the New England Patriots, at home Thursday night against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then a Sunday night game, a big one in Cincinnati the following week. Welcome into It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Sal Capaccio, Matt Bovee joining you. Of course, Matt on WKBW TV Channel 7. You can find me at WGR Sports Radio 550. And our sister station in Boston on Odyssey is WEEI, and that's where we find our guy, Andy Hart, who joins us, also the host and co-host of the Six Rings podcast. I hate the name of the podcast because of all of the scar tissue from the New England Patriots with the Buffalo Bills over the years, but it's actually a really cool name, and we thank you for joining us, Andy.
My pleasure, and we're pretty comfortable. We're not going to have to change our name anytime soon.
I love it. I love that. Let's start there if we can. I think what's super interesting to me, Andy, is the Patriots are 1-5. We know they're not playing well, but nobody's talking about really them being 1-5 here, at least. Mostly it's been about Bill Belichick, his legacy, the future of the Patriots, the organization. Is that what it's been like for you guys? I mean, yeah, of course you get into the season, but has it been more about big picture, or has it been about what's wrong with the offense this year or whatever that is?
For about the first month, it was what's wrong with the offense, Mac Jones, talent, Bill O'Brien. Why is he not the savior? Now we've turned the corner towards it's 1-5. You're not winning the division. You're not making the playoffs. You're not competing. You're not. Like, the season is over. Now it has turned significantly this last week, and even a little bit last week, about, is Bill Belichick done? How does Robert Kraft handle this? The bigger picture, we have fans that are starting to watch more college football and root for quarterbacks. Like, can we get Caleb Williams, or, the dreams or nightmare of having a top 5 pick are starting to become reality in Patriot Nation. And, quite honestly, people don't know how to handle it. Obviously, you guys know as well as anyone the success that was here for so long. And then even in recent years, they made it to November, early December with a path to the postseason still possible, or just sort of hanging around. This team's not hanging around. This team is bottoming out. And so it's turned to Belichick, and do you blow it up, and who's the next guy, and those Kraft level big picture questions.
For the 17 years where the Bills were in a similar position to what the Patriots are going through now, their former GM, Doug Whaley, called it quarterback purgatory, and he took a ton of heat for it, but it was true. They weren't bad enough to ever get a top pick, and they weren't good enough to ever really compete. So they kind of found themselves in the middle there. Do you feel like the fan base has turned? Is this now about, let's get a top pick? Are they rooting for losses at this point, I guess is my question.
Yeah, I did a local TV show last night, and they did one of those live polls, and it was, what do you want Malik Cunningham to do on Sunday? And 50-something% voted start the game. And I truly believe those people were rooting for tanking. Like, that's why you'd start Malik Cunningham, because quite honestly, the guy barely practices at quarterback up until the last week. He's been a wide receiver, the whole thing. But I think the mindset has changed, and I do think the last few years, the Cam Newton frustration, then there was that little blip of positivity, Mac Jones rookie year, make the playoffs, but you weren't really a playoff team, and the Bills showed that by whooping them like you wouldn't believe. And then the regression of the last year plus with the whole Matt Patricia crap last year, and the way Mac just looks like a broken quarterback, and everybody's turned up. Mac does not have a lot of supporters in New England anymore, few and far between. So I think fans are starting to embrace the idea, because they've been through it with the Celtics, say. There's been a few tank jobs over the years with the Celtics. Well, if you get the guy who's Jason Tatum, maybe you start the turnaround. And so now I think they're looking for their quarterback, and that's why I say I think they're watching some of those big timers on Saturdays.
What has happened to Mac Jones? Great segue, because that was my next question anyway, and you just opened the door. Is it he was pretty good his rookie year? We saw him here. I mean, in that playoff game, he made a great throw that obviously Micah Hyde made an incredible play on. Maybe the game is a little different if he hits that, but we saw him here in Buffalo do some nice things in that rookie year, and it's kind of gone downhill since.
Yeah, he I've said this for a while. I think they broke him last year with the frustrations and dysfunctions, and everybody fixated on his little eruptions in December. But he was saddled with just a strange situation from May straight on through. So I never faulted him by the time December came around for kind of losing his cool. And I always said he was watching his career be submarined by what was going on around him. And you're right. He was on a track, Pro Bowl rookie quarterback who took his team to the playoffs. That's impressive.
Yep.
And that's tracking towards $200 million in your bank account in a few years and being a franchise QB and everything that comes with that. Last year, he was broken. This year, I thought everybody believed, okay, Bill O'Brien brings competency, stability. The problem is Mac is surrounded by no talent. I mean, if we're being honest, maybe Kendrick Bourne is a pretty good player. Ramondre Stevenson is a good player who's had a terrible start to the season. The offensive line is hellaciously, they couldn't practice, never mind play. Like they ruined practices with how bad they were. So you put that in, and then I don't think Mac he was never going to be Josh Allen. He was never this stallion that you had to kind of break down and then just harness. His head's his superpower, as Dan Orlovsky would say. He's a game manager. It's accuracy. And that's hard to do when it's just hitting the fan around you. Like literally, you got guys, they have the worst receivers in terms of getting open. So he has to hold on to the ball, except they have the worst offensive line in terms of protecting the quarterback. So he's got to get rid of the ball. And it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. And he hasn't reacted well to it. He has made the second quarter against the Cowboys. He melted down. He started just looking like a guy who was overwhelmed, like throwing off his back foot late across the field, like things that his brain should have told him never do this. And he was doing it for picks and pick sixes. So yeah, I believe Bill Belichick and the management in terms of the talent around him and some of the coaching last year has kind of just broken Mac Jones.
With the Bills on Sunday Night Football last week against the Giants, we're sitting in the press box and they've got all the 4:00 games on. And I'm watching the Patriots Raiders, and it's a play, I think in the first half, where he's kind of rolling to his right and Hunter Henry is wide open and he overshoots it. It's an interception. And I remember looking at the people next to me and going, he's not going to start next week. Like they're going to sit Mac Jones. Now it feels like he is going to start, but I guess the question is, how short's the leash? Like if he throws an interception in the first quarter, is it, all right, Malik Cunningham, you're the starter? Like how does this work?
So that's a great question. And I'm not sure Bill Belichick knows how it worked, because last week in Las Vegas, they had Bailey Zappi, who we all know there was a little Zappi fever last year in New England. He played a couple games, won a couple games. Fans started chanting for him in Foxborough. He was the emergency quarterback last week. The backup was Malik Cunningham, who, as of 4 days earlier, Bill O'Brien stood at a podium and told us, well, Malik really hasn't taken many snaps in practice at quarterback. He's mostly receiver. His QB snaps were actually, according to O'Brien, Taysom Hill scout team snaps when he was running the scout team. Then all of a sudden, he's the backup, which I've been covering this team for 2 decades, and Bill Belichick always beats into your head. The backup is one play away. And so they're saying Malik is one play away, except he only played 6 snaps. His only stats were a 6-yard just jailbreak sack on where he felt like Mac for a minute, and not even his athleticism could help him. So I don't know the answer to the leash, because in my opinion, you had Ian Rappaport went on NFL media and said Mac is going to have a short leash, except he didn't really have a backup quarterback. So I actually think he had the longest leash he's had all year, because Bailey Zappi, who had replaced him the 2 previous weeks, couldn't come in the game. So I don't know if this is blasphemy to say. I don't know if there was a technical error in the way they submitted their inactives, if Bill screwed something up, but it was one of the strangest situations I've seen in 2 decades around this team. So if Bailey Zappi is active this week, absolutely, he could play, because he played in Dallas. He played against the Saints. But if they do the same thing and Malik Cunningham's the backup, I don't think you can ask Malik Cunningham, with what he has to work with and the experience he has, to play 2 quarters or 3 quarters. So it's a mess. The quarterback situation's a mess right now. It just is.
We had a guest on our station on WGR earlier this week who said they have the worst right tackle situation in the NFL. How close is that to your truth that you think about this team?
Oh, I think it's 100% accurate. So let's just use last week's game as a snapshot in Vegas. First play of the game, right tackle Vidarian Lowe, who they acquired from the Vikings at cutdowns. So wasn't here all summer. They had this. My co-host Nick Fitzy Stevens on Six Rings likes to call it a bum fight. They had a bum fight at right tackle, and all of them were bums, so they had to go get more bums at cutdown. But Vidarian Lowe started last week's game with a false start. That was his first snap of the day. His last snap of the day was about as embarrassing an effort on Max Crosby for a safety to end any comeback hopes, as you'll see. And everything in between was equally as bad. He stinks. He's just not good. I feel bad saying that. I kind of wish him well in the XFL or wherever. There's other options now for him. But this has been all year. They're to the point where they brought back a guy this week that you guys, I think, are familiar with, Connor McDermott, who has bounced
Yes.
around.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Connor McDermott, because they stunk at right tackle all last year, too. Isaiah Wynn was sulking, and then they had a couple other bodies. And then Connor McDermott actually finished the year a year ago with like 6 starts. And Bill Belichick in December said, quote, "Thank God we have him." And if I'm Connor McDermott, that goes on my tombstone. Bill Belichick once said, "Thank God we have him."
Love it.
And he may be an option again this week because Riley Reif came back. He got hurt again. They have no capable bodies at right tackle. And that's not to say the rest of the line is good. That's just the worst of a bad offensive line. So yes, that's probably the worst position in football. 30, if you take all the starting spots, Verdarian Lowe might be in line for the worst position in football.
I want to make this incredibly clear. Best is relative. Who is their best weapon?
So if you had asked me that coming into the season, I would have said Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah.
I thought he might be in line. He had 1,000 yards last year and led the team with 69 receptions. I thought he might be in line for one of these like 1,800 yards from scrimmage, 2,000 yards from scrimmage, but he has not been able to get going. Again, we're talking about how bad the line is. That's clearly a part of it. And I think like Mac, he's gotten mentally broken where every time he gets the ball, he's looking for a hole, he's juking, he's dancing instead of just trusting his landmarks, trusting the play, letting it develop. And so if you're going to tell me the here and now who's the best weapon, it's got to be Kendrick Bourne. I mean, he had 10 catches on 11 targets last week. He's the only guy that Mac, A, trusts, and B, makes plays. Hunter Henry is fine. He's a, competent tight end, but he's not going to make plays. He'll get open and he'll catch the ball at 12 yards and get tackled and, whatever, he'll have his 50 yards in a game. But that's the problem. They don't have anybody that is a weapon. They don't have anybody that the Bills defense and Sean McDermott are going to put it on your wristband, find so-and-so. Nope. It doesn't matter who you find because they're all mediocre.
Andy Hart from the Six Rings podcast, WEEI, joining us here on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Sal Capaccio, Matt Bove. Let's go to the other side of the ball. They can still play some defense. And now, obviously, with some injuries, though, that's been a little tougher. No Matthew Judon, no Christian Gonzalez, 2 big blows. They brought J.C. Jackson back, but the numbers aren't that bad on defense. They've been kind of holding it together as much as possible. What have you seen from that unit through all of this, even with the offensive struggles?
Yeah, I think they're still fighting the good fight. Now, they were better equipped to fight the good fight in weeks 1 and week 2 when we were talking moral victories. Oh, you hung in there with Jalen Hurts. You forced a turnover. You gave Mac a chance to try to win the game, even though he couldn't do it. It was funny. At that point, we started talking about, is there a worry about divides in the locker room where the defense is like, we keep doing our job, but you guys aren't doing it. And then you got the injuries. And I mean, any defense in the NFL, you take their 2 best players, they're in trouble. They're going to take a step back. And Matthew Judon and Christian Gonzalez were their 2 best players. But last week, they fought the good fight. Like they bent but didn't break. Whether it was Jimmy Garoppolo or Brian Hoyer, they moved the ball. But I think they've gotten to the red zone 6 times, the Vegas Raiders did. You ended up with 1 turnover, 1 touchdown, and field goals. That's why you were in the game. That's why Mac is throwing to Devontae Parker deep with a hope that we can get a field goal here. That's why. Will it hold up? Because they continue to be banged up everywhere. I'm sure you guys have looked at the 20-person injury report and the 6 guys, and it's getting worse.
But we see that all the time with Bill Belichick, right? So
that is true. But see, this time I think it's real. I think they really are really banged up. And it's to the point where a guy like Keon White, their rookie 2nd-round pick, who they really like, was supposed to step up for Judon. With Judon out, now Keon White is out. So now you're getting that domino of all of a sudden you're on the 3rd best guy. The secondary at corner is still a mess. That's why they had to bring J.C. Jackson back, who, he had good times in New England, not necessarily against Stephon Diggs. Diggs seemed to enjoy most matchups with J.C. Jackson over the years. They have a few guys that I really have a lot of respect for. The Kyle Duggars, Jelani Tavai, Jabril Peppers had a huge hit last week to force a turnover. They're still giving it whatever they have on the defensive side of the ball, and it is still the better side of the ball. There's no doubt about that.
Where do you think is the biggest mismatch for the Bills? Like, is there a particular position where you're like, they could just go? I mean, obviously for us, it's going to be like, okay, the Bills defense should be able to completely shut down the Patriots offense. But I think there is a couple people here, at least in Western New York, who are like, okay, that defense, though, they can make plays, and the Bills offense, they haven't been great the last few weeks.
Well, the defense is solid. I wouldn't say it necessarily makes plays. They only have 3
Right.
takeaways all year.
Which is
Jabril
a
Peppers.
very big difference from last year, right, Andy?
Oh, yeah. They were second in the league with 30,
Yeah.
I believe, last year, or up near 30. And it's essentially been a part of the Belichick whole style over the years. It's bend but don't break. It's force some turnovers, and that'll sway the ball game. Don't give up big plays. Well, now they can't force those turnovers. Jabril Peppers has 2 massive hits. One led to the pick last week that bounced off Devontae Adams. One was a Jalen Hurts fumble in week 1. The only other turnover on the year is a Christian Gonzalez interception. So he's gone.
That's wild.
And it's just like,
That's wild.
where? So I agree on paper. This is one of those games, if you're a Patriot fan and you're trying to talk yourself into something, it's, well, Josh Allen can be a little loose with the ball at times, but they haven't taken advantage of those types of things this year. And the pass rush, as I said, no Judon, no Keon, like you're starting to get diminished there. So I don't know if that's if the Bills kick field goals, they'll probably win the game. Like they'll probably drive down the field. And normally you say, oh, football math, you can't keep kicking field goals. No, as long as you don't turn it over, you can kick field goals and beat the Patriots. That's sort of been a recipe for success. The real matchup, if I'm a Bills fan, that I'm sort of lusting after is what we talked about earlier. Just whatever the offensive line is for the Patriots, go kick the living. I mean, what is it? 24 sacks in 6 games. So you're averaging 4 sacks a game. I would take the upside on that. All your matchups, the interior line, they've had to start rookies in recent weeks at both guard spots, Antonio Mafi and City. So you run a couple tackle stunts, twists. It's like they've never seen it before. They just look at each other and let both guys run towards Mac Jones for sacks. Like it's been bad on the line, and this is a pretty good pass rush you guys bring to town.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was the thought last week too. But obviously, the Giants didn't do too bad of a job, and they hung into the game as long as possible. But you're right. The Bills still held them out of the end zone for the entire game. So I just want to go back to the Bill Belichick thing a little bit, and before we let you go, Josh Allen has really done a great job against Bill Belichick. It seems like every time these two teams play, Belichick doesn't have much answer. But I don't think he's done a good job against a lot of mobile quarterbacks, right? I mean, like it just feels like that. Has he kind of just been a little bit stuck in the way he wants to create his defense and maybe hasn't evolved enough, and that's what's happening? Or is there something else at play here? Because it seems like Justin Fields last year, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, these mobile quarterbacks have done a pretty good job against Bill Belichick. What is the answer to that? Is it really just Bill kind of being stuck?
I think it goes back to athleticism, talent, speed. I mean, we had Matt Groh 2 years ago, pre-draft, just talking about, if you want to be a faster team, you have to draft fast players.
Right.
And I don't know that the Patriots have always put a premium. Even Belichick, going back through the years, for all their strengths, guys like Mike Vrabel were not in the NFL for their speed. They were big, strong, smart, versatile. You got a long way down the list before you said, damn, that guy's a great athlete. And, Jabril Peppers, I would say, great athlete. Kyle Duggar, great athlete. So they've added some of those, but I don't know that there's enough. And I've always thought, even going back to Cam Newton would give this team trouble. Sometimes you just end up with your guy and my guy in the middle of some green grass, and one of them's going to win. And, and it's no shame. These are great athletes. Like, I remember a play a couple of years ago I watched where Lamar actually embarrassed Matt Milano on the goal line. And I thought, well, that's something, because I think Matt Milano's a pretty damn good athlete, and he just did that to him. Matt Milano's a better athlete than any linebacker the Patriots will field. Jawan Bentley or Jelani Tavai, these guys, Anthony Jennings, they're just not great athletes. They don't have a lot of speed. So I think these matchups, and then getting into the Josh Allen one, I kind of want to turn this around you.
Yeah.
He's been great ever since, in my opinion, Bill Belichick told ESPN Josh Allen's not an MVP candidate, and that got out. And am I right to assume maybe, we talk about chips on shoulders and memories. Does Josh Allen still remember maybe that little bit of a slight? Does he still try to prove something to Bill Belichick every time he takes the field against the Patriots, you think?
It's a good question.
I think
Yeah.
so. I think he's got a list of people who he knows in the back of his head have like here's a good one, for example. So the Belichick one, Jalen Ramsey, before he ever even played it down in football, did an interview with like GQ and said he was a trash quarterback. And every time the Bills play Jalen Ramsey, he loses his mind. And I think that's just added onto I think Josh is very much like that, which I think sometimes maybe you got to rein in, but he's the fiercest competitor the Bills have had in recent memory. So obviously bring that juice. It helps them. Sal, do you agree?
And I'm going to say this, Andy, to me, it's more big picture too of, I really don't know if Patriots fans can ever understand what it still means for the Bills to beat the Patriots, to this fan base, to this organization, for what they endured for 20 straight years. You say you've been covering that team for 2 decades. I've been here and covering this team for a decade, but grew up in Buffalo and watching this. And that team and that coach, what they did to this organization here, it will never, ever, ever get old to beat them into oblivion, ever. And that has been pounded into every single person's head that walks through these halls and walks through this building. It doesn't mean the same to the Patriots fan base. They did it to everyone. The Bills were just like, they would stomp on the feet like the old thing, the cartoon, get down there, stay in your hole, right? But now the shoe is turned, and I'm telling you, this is something this fan base and this organization revels in. It's why, to me, Sean McDermott embarrassed Bill Belichick on national TV on The Perfect Game, we call it, and was throwing to an offensive tackle already up 4 scores.
Interesting. That is interesting because, I do think from a Patriots perspective, even from an internal Patriots perspective, over the years, the Jets were always the team that was different because of the whole Belichick border war, everything that went into that rivalry. And, it was just like the Bills. Yeah, Brady owns the Bills and the winning streak and all that. But it's interesting to sort of see the reverse side of that, reverse engineer it. And whatever it is, it's working for Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen. Every time they play now, they put up numbers and they get the job done.
Well, the Patriots still beat the Jets a lot, though, too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true.
And Andy, the last one for me. Does he get the record? Does he even get a chance to get the record? Is he around
does he do it in
long
New
enough?
England?
Yeah, like what happens?
So I have now reached the point. I will be surprised if Bill Belichick's the coach of the Patriots next year. I've just reached that point. I don't,
amazing.
You mentioned wake-up call, the idea that there could have been a wake-up call a few years ago for Belichick. The wake-up call to me is no longer on the Belichick level. It's on the Kraft level. And Robert has said a lot of things in recent years about wanting to get back to the playoffs. I expect to be a contender every year. Well, not only are you not a contender, you're going in the wrong direction. You're going from competitive, we called it the middle meh, where, maybe you weren't a contender, but you were competing, and now you're the blah. You're at the bottom of the league. You're down with the really bad teams looking at draft picks come October. And Robert Kraft has never lived this life. And I don't know that people understand that. Never, as owner of the New England Patriots, he took over. It was Parcells and Bledsoe and credibility. He didn't live the Rod Rust, Dick McPherson era of the early 90s. And I don't think this is setting well for the 82-year-old owner. And Jonathan Kraft, who will take over the organization, can be a very competitive, reactionary, volatile person. And I just think the way this has gotten ugly, and very specifically the last 2 prior to last week, they lose to Jerry Jones. They get embarrassed. And I say lose to Jerry Jones, not the Cowboys, not the Dallas. They have a frenemy relationship with Jones where it's always competing. And to get embarrassed at AT&T Stadium, and then a week later to come home and in the second half get embarrassed by a mediocre Saints team to the point where Patriots fans are leaving, he's looking out his luxury box window and there's taillights getting on Route 1 merging in there from Gillette Stadium. These leave marks with him. So, I don't know the exit strategy. I don't believe he'll be fired mid-season. I can't envision Robert firing him mid-season. But somehow, some way, whether it's packaged as a retirement, resignation, mutual parting of ways, I think somebody else is going to be running the Patriots next year.
By the way, I am very much alike with Robert Kraft. I too did not live the Dick McPherson era. I was a freshman at Syracuse the year after he left, and Paul Pasqualoni took over. Although he was a really good coach at Syracuse, Dick McPherson. I'll say that about him. And look, feel free to use this on your show. You don't have to. But I'm just going to tell you, the way I've described Belichick over the last 2 years is he's Brooks from Shawshank Redemption. He got out of the prison. He was institutionalized by having Brady for so long. The world went and got itself in a big damn hurry, and he didn't catch up to it.
That's pretty good. That is pretty good. That is.
Feel free.
I may use that. I may steal that.
You
Do I have
got
to
it.
credit you?
No, you could just say, this is what they're saying in Buffalo. It's all good. Hey, Andy, thank you so much. We went a little
Thank you,
long with
Andy.
you on the podcast. And I know you got your own podcast. Six Rings is what they call it over there in Boston. It's the Odyssey podcast like we have here in Buffalo. And it's always game day in Buffalo. Andy, great stuff. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I'm kind of just hoping for a competitive game on Sunday, but I don't feel great about it.
We'll see. And then, of course, and by the way, real quick, Matt, you pointed out the stat. Tell them the Bills' schedule coming up and the Patriots and how it relates to them, which is amazing.
So the Bills, the rest of the season, have 2 1:00 games left.
That's
so
it.
The Bills
2
have
1
become-
o'clock Sunday games.
That's it. They're both against the Patriots. So I think the networks are like, hey, we want to see the Bills. We just don't want to see the Patriots. So it feels like how the tides have
Isn't it
turned.
amazing?
I guess if it's a terrible season, that's the one saving grace for me is you're done with work by like 7 o'clock at night. No more of those like 3 a.m.s when doing a post game show. So hey, I guess I'll take it. Silver line.
It's all great, man. Thank you again. Thanks so much.
Hey guys, thank you.
Okay, you got it. That is Andy Hart of WEEI and also the Six Rings podcast. All right, let's talk Bills and what's going on this week with the team. As Matt and I talk here on the podcast, I am actually in the Bills radio booth. I'm at practice here. I just got back from watching practice, and Matt, I will report Josh Allen's on the practice field. He is throwing the ball. I tweeted out some video about it a little while ago as we talk kind of in the recording of part of the podcast. It seems like he's on track to play. I don't think there's any issue there. However, Ed Oliver is not at practice again. Sean McDermott did say when Joe Buscaglia asked him, are you hopeful he'll practice tomorrow, meaning Friday? He said, I am hopeful. That doesn't mean he's going to play. So that would be a big loss for the Bills on top of not having Daquan Jones.
Yeah, it'd be a huge loss when you consider their other options at defensive tackle are not great. That doesn't mean they're terrible, but it just makes you wonder. Ed Oliver, I think it was he played close to 85% of snaps the last game, which is so drastically different than how they usually approach their snap counts with defensive tackles or really just anybody on defense besides the secondary and the linebackers. So they need Ed Oliver. Can they get by a week without Ed Oliver? Certainly. I think if it's okay, if you're rushing him back for one game, you just make sure that he's ready to go for the Thursday game and you should be able to go. You should be, good to get a win. But at the same time, man, that's a big blow for the Bills. With the injuries that they've already sustained. Ooh, tell me this. I don't even want to say it. I was going to say, is he the most important player on that defense now that the other guys have been injured? I would have said it's Milano and Trey.
I think Terrell Bernard is quickly becoming that player.
Okay, fair. I mean, he's been awesome. So I think that you're probably spot on with that. But yeah, Ed Oliver's super important. Obviously, we'll find out more Friday. If it's a long-term thing, that's a really big problem for the Bills. If he misses a game, you should still be able to get the win.
And by the way, that's no disrespect to guys like Taron Johnson, who you could make that argument for as well,
he's awesome too,
or other players on the team. But I think Terrell Bernard, and by the way, we should talk a little bit about Terrell Bernard and the season he's having. He dug some stats up today to talk about it. But I do want to bring it back to Ed Oliver real quick in the injury. We also have to remember here, the Bills have a game 4 days after, right? Thursday night against the Bucs. So even if Ed Oliver's kind of iffy, or anybody for that matter, Damian Harrison, concussion protocol, the neck sprain, also not practicing, and Quentin Morris with the ankle injury, not practicing. If any of these guys, let's say, I wouldn't expect Harris to be in this situation, but if any of these guys are close, Bills may elect to hold back on them as of to not re-aggravate something and not have them for a key AFC game 2 weeks from then, because they have to play obviously the game in 4 days against the Tampa Bay Bucs.
Yeah, I think that in this case, it's better to be smart with all of these decisions and make sure that they are ready to go, even if that means giving them a couple days rest. It's tough, though. I think maybe I have a little bit of recency bias seeing how difficult the game was against the Giants. If the Bills would have beat the Giants decisively, I think I would have said the same thing. You could honestly it's almost a load management conversation. You could sit some of these guys and make sure that they're healthy for the more important games down the stretch, and you should still be okay. But I don't know, something about the Bills going against the Patriots on the road, it does not feel like it's ever going to be a cakewalk. I don't even really remember in years past, right? Like last year, the Patriots weren't very good. The Bills went in there, they won by a couple scores, but it wasn't dominant. The times that this team has gone on the road to New England, they've been close-ish games. So I don't think that the Patriots win this game, but I'm expecting something that's close. And obviously, if it's going to be what I think a close game, then you need as many guys as you can.
Last year, they won 24-10 on a primetime game.
Yeah, that was the Thursday night game. I think
And the only thing the Patriots did in that game was literally throw it to a defensive back on
who
offense for
caught a
touchdown.
who caught a touchdown early in the game. Yeah. So I don't know. I just maybe those
I think the ghosts of New England past are still in your head.
probably a little bit. Probably a little bit.
But there's a
totally
point to
fair.
be made here of Matt. There's a point to be made to your point, which I don't want to dismiss, because I think the point to be made here is the Bills' offense hasn't looked great the last 2 weeks,
No.
and the Patriots have Bill Belichick, and they can still play some defense, right? I mean,
Mhm.
so if you combine those things, this doesn't have to be the Bills just walking into New England and coming out with a 3-touchdown victory. That did not happen against the Giants. If the Bills continue to sputter on offense as they have the last 2 weeks, this is going to be a dogfight at Gillette
Yeah.
Stadium.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, the Patriots defense, even without Gonzalez and Judon, is better than what the Giants have. And
Yeah.
the Bills scored 14 points against the Giants, and all of them came in the fourth quarter. I do not think that the offense is like this massive problem that cannot be fixed, but I think that it's trending in the direction that you want to get this thing figured out sooner rather than later, because if you don't, then I think it's going to cost you a couple bad games. Actually, it's a conversation I had with Joe Biscaglia. You mentioned him earlier about how it felt like last year the Jets game kind of was a signal that maybe the offense had some issues. And then for the next few weeks, they had the Josh injury, but they just did not look the same for a little while. So that's the thing. It's like, okay, there's been a lot of people talking about Ken Dorsey this week. There's been a lot of people talking about what's going on with the offense. You should be able to go score 30 points against this team. You should be able to do that pretty much against anybody. But are you able to execute and actually do that? Until they do, I'm going to have a little bit of doubts and just wondering what their ceiling actually is offensively.
On the other side of the ball, Terrell Bernard, who I mentioned a little while ago, I want to give you his stat line for the year. 57 total tackles, 5 of those for loss, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, 2 QB hurries, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 pass breakups. Matt, not only is he the only player in the NFL, not just linebacker, the only player in the entire NFL with at least 50 tackles and 2 sacks, he's also the only player with at least 50 tackles and at least 2 fumble recoveries. Now, that can be a little bit of luck, but it does show that he's around the ball a lot. Think back to preseason. Think back to training camp. I know he missed the time. Think back to the draft. Think back to losing free agency before that, Tremaine Edmonds, and all the questions and how many people basically said the Bills were dumb for not going out and addressing middle linebacker. And how can you go in-house? They don't have anybody. Look how small this guy is. The Bills made the right call.
They did. They absolutely did. And I think this has worked out better than even they would have anticipated.
I agree.
So he has exceeded all of the expectations. I remember when they drafted Terrell Bernard, we're sitting there in the draft, we're sitting there in the media room covering the draft, and you know how they bring out all the papers with all the stats on it. And he had that crazy bowl game with Baylor where he had, I think, like 18 tackles or something. He was the player of the game. They win the game. And it was like, okay, like that is impressive, but how does this translate to the NFL as an undersized linebacker? And when he was next to Milano, it was like, okay, he certainly looks like he is capable of playing this, but maybe it's just easier for him because he gets to play next to one of the best linebackers in the entire NFL. But even since the Milano injury, he has been out there making plays, flying all over the field. So the thing that we've always said about the linebacker position, even going back to Tremaine Edmonds, splash plays. You need to make the splash plays. And that's something that Edmonds did not do a good enough job of while he was here. Awesome player, did a lot for them. But, I mean, what are we, 6 games into the season? And look at all of the moments that Bernard has already had. I mean, it's not even just the numbers. I think on the play where Tyrod hands it to Saquon at the end of the second quarter that they shouldn't have done, who's the guy who stops him? It's Bernard. And then he gets help from everybody else. Like, he's the one who makes that play. That is a massive swing in that game. If they do not make that play, they probably lose the game. Even in the game that they lost to the Jags, Bernard was all over the place. So I've really liked his play. And also, it's not to this level, certainly. Dorian Williams looks like he might be a player too.
I agree with that. We all kind of have seen the, kind of over pursuit a little bit here or there.
Flashes,
the missed tackles in the Jacksonville game. I'm not worried about that. I think those things happen with reps. You're taking a player clean off his couch, basically. I shouldn't say it that way. Clean off the bench. He was playing, obviously. He was on special teams. Yeah. But you're putting him in the middle of a ready-made defense that's here to try and win a Super Bowl and asking him to fill Matt Milano's shoes. And this kid hasn't had enough reps. And that's not a fault of the Bills. I mean, how's he supposed to play? I totally get that. But I thought he I didn't hate his game against Jacksonville. He just made a few mistakes. They took him out because he was over pursuing and missing tackles. I thought he was much better against the Giants. It still wasn't perfect. He's going to get better, Matt. He's going to make those plays. And I love what Sean McDermott said this week about him.
Oh, yeah.
He said, this guy, he is all about football. He's all about studying his craft. And that's the kind of guy, the Bills DNA they like. I really like his game, and I think he can be a special player for sure.
I'm glad you brought up what Sean said, because I actually, after listening back to the press conference from Wednesday when Sean was specifically asked about him, I had one of those moments where, if you've covered the Bills long enough, or even if you've just listened to Sean long enough, you can tell when he's saying something because he genuinely believes it and he's not trying to send a message to somebody. Because it's a balance of a head coach. It's like you're actually saying you genuinely feel this way about something, or you want that person to know you're saying X, Y, or Z about them. His answer about Dorian Williams felt like he is genuinely optimistic about what this kid can bring to the team, not just this year, but also down the road. When Matt Milano's healthy and ready to go, Matt Milano's going to be on the field. But that doesn't mean there's not a world where Dorian Williams can be rotated in, or he can be, your extra linebacker if you think they're going to run the ball or something like that. So it feels like they have certainly hit on Bernard, and Dorian Williams, the sample size is small, is trending in the direction of a player who could, be impactful for a while for them.
Maybe Dorian Williams' extension could mean a longer career for Taron Johnson. Do you know what I mean? Maybe you don't have to play as much nickel because you have a guy that can fly around and do that. That's a discussion down the road, but I agree. And it's a good problem to have, obviously, for the Buffalo Bills. I just want to also go back. This is not to disparage Tremaine Edmonds, but just to give a comparison for everybody. We just told you all the stat numbers on Terrell Bernard. 57 tackles, 5 for loss, and then 2 of everything. 2 sacks, 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
Tremaine Edmonds, 54 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, no interceptions, no quarterback hurries even on the season. No sacks.
I don't know if he ever had a season where he had more than 2 interceptions, which Bernard has already had while he was with the Bills. I think he had a year or 2 where he did have 2. And I'm not saying that's the only mark of what makes a good linebacker. I'm just saying, when we talk about those specifically splash plays, make those plays. And Bernard feels like he has a knack to do it. There's one other person I want to give a little bit of a shout out to, because I don't think we talked about him enough following the Giants game. Christian Benford is another one of those young players who is emerging as a very solid, capable player. He is going to get beat by elite wide receivers. Great corners do. So that's not going to be, something that does not happen. Another week, though, where you have a matchup where you think your secondary should be able to do a pretty good job. I fully think that if they're healthy, their 2 starters are going to be Dane Jackson and Christian Benford. But with those 2 guys on the field, Christian Benford is your number 1 corner, and I like what he brings to the table.
By the way, Dane Jackson practicing today for the Bills, which is really good news. Kyrie Elam practicing today. He was mentioned as an ankle injury. The only 3 people not practicing on Thursday are Ed Oliver, Quentin Morris, and Damian Harris. We'll get a full update on Friday. By the time you listen to this, you might already know exactly. By the way, I might as well just let everybody know, in case you haven't, because I've never really plugged it on here. The only place to hear Sean McDermott every Friday is on the Extra Point Show on WGR Sports Radio 550. There's no other media. Every Friday, he gives the injury report. We have him. I talk with him with Sneaky Joe DiBiase. So check that out on Fridays. You'll get the injury report with Sean McDermott. Ahead of the Thursday night game next week, it'll be on Wednesday. All right, let's take a look around the NFL. This is a really, really big week in the AFC, and I'll explain why. All right, Matt, so let's just play this out that the Bills win this week. If they don't, then we have a lot of other issues to talk about, of course. Let's say they go to New England. Let's just they go to New England and they win. Bills go to 5-2. Okay, later that day, Chargers at Chiefs. Look, I understand that the Chargers have not looked that great. This is always a close game. I went and I looked the last 2 years, the 4 games they played, 6 points, 6 points in overtime, 3 points, 3 points. All right, this is always a close game. And if the Chiefs win, hand them the West Division already. No one's catching them if they win this game. The Chargers need to win this game. So that could happen. And then later at night, Dolphins at Eagles on Sunday Night Football. Eagles coming off a loss, especially if the Bills win and the Dolphins lose. Bills are back in first place in the AFC East. This is a really big swing week in the AFC.
Do you know who would have the tiebreaker between Baltimore and I can look it up right now? Baltimore and Buffalo, because if they were both 5-2, like if Baltimore wins, it would be Baltimore. Because I was going to say with the scenario you just painted, I think the Bills would be the 1 seed in the entire AFC, but they wouldn't. Baltimore, if they beat Detroit, which is also a really tough matchup, they would be the number 1
Yes,
seed.
that's
But I
another
mean,
big one.
that's
Obviously,
another
you're
big
right.
one. So you're looking around the league this week, and it's like, wow, like absolute. And same thing. By the time most people listen to this episode, the results will be out, but if Trevor Lawrence is not
That's
able
right.
to play on Thursday night and they drop a game to the Saints, that's another one of the teams that obviously you've already lost to that you're, I don't want to say chasing, but you're competing with. So this is a really crucial stretch for the Bills. You know, I described it before last week as 6 games, you got to win 5 of them. I
Mhm.
still feel the same way. I feel like the Bengals have slowly started to figure things out a little bit. So that game a couple weeks ago, you probably felt a lot better about than maybe you do now. Still a winnable game, no questions asked, but you have to beat the teams you're better than. You are much better than the Patriots, and you are better than the Bucks. Like, especially given where you're playing, like you got to beat the Patriots, and the Bucks are a tougher game, but it's also at home. Like another game you have to win.
All right, let's let me ask, what do you think happens in that Dolphins Eagles game Sunday night?
I bet you could guess what I think happens in that game.
You think the Dolphins are going to win?
Yeah, I do. I do. I guess to my fault. I believe in the Dolphins too much. I just really do. I think it's the perfect system for Tua to really succeed in. And I know what the Bills did to them, but I also know what happened at the beginning of that game and, you know, the injuries that they were. I just think the Dolphins are very good. I don't think that they're untouchable by any stretch. I think they're going to be one of those teams that gets 11 or 12 wins, and they are going to be absolutely, you know, a contender at the end of the season. But
Okay,
I
well, let's do this then. Okay, you say 11, 12. They're already at 5. Where else are they losing all these games if they're not losing to the Eagles?
well, I
They
guess
have the
it's
Chiefs in
yeah.
Germany,
Mhm.
but Matt, I mean, then they have Raiders, Jets, Commanders, Titans, Jets, Cowboys, Ravens, Bills.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to kind of like the Bills end of the schedule, right? Like it's similar opponents to who the Bills are going to be playing. I think realistically, they'll lose a game that they also part of this is Tua, the health. Like I think that he's going to, you know, be fine, but history tells us otherwise. I don't know if he's ever played a full season. So I don't know if I want to bank on that happening this year.
Best thing that happened for the Eagles in this game for the Bills and their fans, I think,
Is
is the
that they're
Eagles
coming off a
losing
loss
last week. Yeah,
for
I
sure.
do. I think
And
I think that that's the best thing.
I think there's something to be said about the Chargers too, losing a close
Agreed.
game, and you're 2 and
Agreed.
3, and it's like, okay, like,
You got to
yeah,
win.
you got to go against the big bad Chiefs. You're really going to be 2 and 4 because then you're having a very different conversation. If you're 2 and 4, and the team that you're chasing in your division is 6 and 1, like you
Mhm.
said, good luck catching them. And if you're 2 and 4, good luck catching the wild card teams too. So I think it's a huge game for the Chiefs.
Browns won last week, a real big win for them over the 49ers. Of course, it happened on a missed field goal, but hey, I mean, the Browns played tight. They played good defense. They didn't have their starting quarterback, Deshaun Watson. Where are you on the Browns right now? They're at the Colts this week, by the way.
I'm not as high on the Browns as some people are. Like I've seen some people say it's the best defense in the NFL and they're a legitimate contender because of their defense. And their offense just kind of needs to take that next step. Until Deshaun Watson proves anything, I just don't know. You know, it's funny. It's a big storyline this week. Like, is Deshaun Watson going to play? How much better are they with Deshaun Watson? I don't know the answer to that. Like last year when the Bills played them because he was still suspended, like it legitimately felt like Jacoby Brissett was better than Deshaun Watson for the Browns when he was actually on the field. So if he's half of the quarterback he once was, then yeah, maybe they're a sneaky competitive team. But I don't even know if he's halfway there because when I've watched him, they just do not look good.
Yeah, I do think they have a very good defense. I agree. Maybe not as much hyped. It was. I mean, they shut down San Francisco, but really, I mean, that was a very bad weather game as well. Did you see the stat? Jim Schwartz against Kyle Shanahan. Did you see this?
No.
So
Oh, yes, I did.
Jim
Actually, yes, I
Schwartz
did.
defenses against Kyle Shanahan offenses. Like Jim Schwartz
Mhm.
is like 8-1 now. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's something ridiculous. Like I just looked it up. You want to know Deshaun Watson's stats on the year? He's played 3 games. How many
Okay.
touchdowns has he thrown in 3 games?
5.
4, less, with 2 interceptions for 678 yards in 3 games. So, I mean, he's throwing 215 yards a game and a touchdown a week. Like, that doesn't knock my socks off, even with an amazing defense. You need your offense to do something, and it's not like you can lean on Nick Chubb anymore. So that's not to say the other guys that they have aren't able to contribute, but they're not Nick Chubb. I don't know. I don't think there is. I think they're the second best team in the AFC North. Is that fair? Yeah, actually, I would say third. I think the Ravens are still better than them.
Yeah, it's a really tough division. I mean, the Steelers are 3-3. I don't know. I mean, look, we say it all the time. I've said it. Mike Tomlin rolls out of bed and wins 9 games, and somehow they're 3-3 right now because they don't look like a 3-3 team. But they're at the Rams this week. They're 3-2. Excuse me, they're 3-2.
Yeah,
they're at the Rams this week, and the Rams are 3-3. But I mean, the Steelers could be 4-2 when it's all said and done this week. That's not a world beater of a team, and the Rams, and they're coming off a bye. That's a really interesting division. One other team I want to talk about real quick before we end this. The Jets. Real big win last week against the Philadelphia Eagles. They give them their first loss. The Jets are on a bye this week. It's a Jets team that a lot of people think, okay, getting through the next few weeks, maybe we can get Aaron Rodgers back. I think that's a little ambitious. But it's a Jets team that is still staying afloat without Aaron Rodgers, which is super interesting.
Yeah, it is. So, and then you look, they've got their bye week. After that, they host the Giants. So that's another game. Well, not that it really matters if they host the Giants or on the
that's a great point.
On the road.
Actually, they don't host the Giants. It is a Giants home game.
There you go. So, oh my God, they got to travel to the other locker room. After that, though, it's Chargers, who we don't know exactly what they are. I don't think the Raiders are good. Then it's a little bit of a tough stretch because you've got Bills, Dolphins, Falcons, Texans, Dolphins. So that's going to be kind of that area where they determine, are they a wild card team or are they a team that misses the playoffs and maybe was good enough to be a real contender with a quarterback, but is just not that legit. I don't know. I think the defense is real, and I see that, they've done what they've done to Allen and what they've done to Hurt and what they've done to Mahomes and all that stuff. I did not like the comments from Saleh. I just think that's
I didn't either. I didn't either.
I just think it's dumb. Like, what are you? I know he's trying to send a message to his team that they're legit, but that's like when they played the Bills in the second game last year and then said, like, we'll see them again, and they finished with 7 wins. Like why?
He said, well, he said we'll see them again, then they didn't win a game the rest of the year.
That's what I mean. Like, why? I don't know. I guess project confidence, but do you really want to do it when you're talking about those guys? It's easier for the Eagles. They're not going to play the Eagles for like another 4 years. So I guess you can get away with that. But do you really want to be saying that stuff when you got to play the Bills in a couple weeks and maybe you got to play the Chiefs again at some point?
Right. I know. I agree with you. I didn't like it. I mean,
and I love him as a coach.
Do you know what they did last year when they beat the Bills in New York? That game where Josh got hurt, the game where Josh threw a couple interceptions. I don't know if you remember what happened there either.
No, I don't think so.
It was such a big deal for that organization. Remember, it's halfway through the year. Robert Saleh gave a game ball to every single employee in the organization.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. But hey, whatever. Do you? I like him as a coach a lot. I think he's really good.
I do too. But he reminds me of me. Super energetic, bald, That's why I was as buff as him, but
Yeah, he's a very, very strong human. This is a fun week in the NFL, and it's very different than the last few weeks in the NFL. I think for Bills fans, soak in the last 1:00 game, until the end of the season.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect day to be playing at 1:00 because then you can really watch some good games the rest of the day. You just need to hope the Bills don't ruin the day for you with a loss. But, if you sit there, you watch the Bills win, and then you can look around the rest of the league. It's like at 4:00, you can watch Chiefs Chargers. At 8:00, you can watch Giant or Eagles Dolphins. And then, go to bed and start again on Monday for a really short week with that Thursday night game coming up.
Good advice from Matt Bove, and we will be back with you before that short week. Next week, the Bills play on a Thursday night. It's supposed to be good weather, by the way. Keep your fingers crossed. 63 degrees next Thursday in Orchard Park. And it's going to turn after that. Let's hope that stays the case before that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
If I sound a little delirious, which might be the case, maybe I normally do, I'm not exaggerating. I think I'm sick. I think how you kind of lost your voice coming back from London? I think it's starting to hit me for some reason. I legitimately, we're recording this on Thursday morning, okay? I worked Wednesday. I went to Bills practice. I got home at like 6:15. I fell asleep until 7:30. I woke up not knowing what was going on. I told my wife I wasn't feeling good. We put the baby to bed. We did our stuff. And then I fell back asleep at like 9 o'clock and don't know if I would have woke up if it wasn't for everybody in the house getting up and getting ready for their day. I don't know if I've ever felt this level of exhaustion in my life. But the baby's teething and wakes up in the middle of the night, and it's like, oh, goodness gracious. It's fun. It's a treat.
All right, well, you go get some rest. And while you're resting, everybody can listen to this. If you haven't listened, when you're listening to it right now, but of course, you know where to find us. And if you're listening somewhere else, the best way is always on iTunes, Spotify, or at the WGR or Odyssey app. And of course, watch us at the Sal Sports YouTube page. A lot going on there, including Sal's House, the new endeavor I have on the YouTube page. So check that out as well. All right. Thanks to Mike Robier for doing a great job. Thank you very much to Andy Hart from WEEI and the Six Rings podcast for joining us here on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. We'll talk to you after the Bills take on the Patriots and look ahead to Thursday Night Football against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.